lockdown, and welcome to our second session. Hi there, Pete. Good to have you on the show, and welcome to everyone else. And this tonight we were going to have a special guest, Tom Coopy. Wait for it. He's got a really good excuse. His daughter was inviting them to a really posh lockdown meal, as a family, and she wanted to really make it nice for them, and it might have slightly not crossed Tom's mind that the two things conflicted, and so we've excused him. So have a great time, Tom, wherever you are. I'm sure you're at home, and I hope it goes really well and your beautiful daughter is pleased with what she's able to pull off. So, awesome. So today we're going to have a little additional look at the subject of creating the environment and really saving the environment. So we talk a lot about the environment in terms of the big global scene, but actually the environment, you could say, begins at home. And certainly from a being a dad point of view, the environment that we have most influence on is the environment at home. And it's where we really need to give ourselves some, kind of pep talks, really, and have a think about how we're doing and how we can create the environment where our young people thrive and where our spouse thrives as well. So, again, as we said last week, we'd love you to comment throughout the show or the session, whatever we're going to call it. I feel like I'm on TV. But throughout our session today, do comment and we'll try and respond to you, and it helps us to know to maybe head in a particular direction that you might find more helpful. But so we talked about last week about how the atmosphere that we create between the husband and wife, the mum and dad in the relationship, really sets a tone and creates an environment where the young people can thrive and do well, or it can be sort of hostile and difficult and competitive and so on. And so we want to just tonight spend a little bit of time thinking about how we do that well. And I'm going to tell a few stories which I haven't cleared with my children, so I hope I don't get in too much trouble. But I think for us, we've got 4 children, as many of you know, and our oldest is now 27 and is doing great. He's going to get married in November. And but of course, when he came into the world, he came in as this little tiny baby, and I felt completely ill-equipped to be a dad. And somehow I kind of thought it would come naturally, and to some extent it does. And you sort of do what you kind of are told must be done at that stage of a child's life by all the books and experts and your friends and so on. But essentially, you're there on the business end of it all, delivering it alone with your spouse, and it can be pretty daunting, I think. And and I think what happens is this little person came in. Certainly for us, what happened was this little person came into our lives with a whole set of agendas that we were not really ready for. It's like, first one is feed me now. And there's poor Anna trying to work out how you actually do it, and then she would feel terrible that the baby wasn't getting enough food and all this. So you have this kind of huge anxiety about your baby starving to death, whilst you're trying to give it the most nutritious diet possible. And dad's there like, well, I don't know. How do you know when the thing that they're drinking from is empty, and therefore they've had a full, their quota for the day, and all this kind of stuff. And oh my life. So challenging times. And then, of course, as this young person begins to assert their identity, we realize that their values are not necessarily in sync with ours at all yet. and we have to begin to bring about that process of training and kind of discipling, where we're teaching the young person how to actually behave. And I think someone once said, the first lesson that a toddler has to learn, or a baby has to learn, as they come into toddlerhood, is how to defer gratification. So that's the first one I'm going to throw at Chris, and I'm going to just say, did you find, Chris, that any of your children naturally got the message that deferring gratification was sometimes the right thing to do?
I would say there was a huge difference between the children and in how quickly they took that on board. Our firstborn was so good at picking stuff up like that we thought we were good parents for the first couple of years till number two came along. It was the complete opposite. But we've seen a very wide spectrum of what age they start to understand that deferring gratification is a good idea at all.
Yeah. So the first one was really good, and
second
then
one,
it unravels a bit.
Second one was a chaos monster in the second year of their life, and the third one was really quite stubborn. The fourth one was more like the first one, and the fifth one was different again. They're all different, and you can't take it for granted that they get it at any particular time. It's a bit, development goes in certain ways. They start to be able to see, and then they start to be able to make sounds, and so on. There's a linear process. You get around about the first birthday, they'll be able to say something, and a month or two before or after, they'll be able to walk. But the finer concept, some of them don't seem to get it through their skins, and others, it's a real battle, and there are lots of battles to be fought.
Yeah. So our firstborn realized fairly soon that he had the power to make us laugh, which he exploited all the time. And he was really masterful if you were in the process of trying to tell him off or adjust his behavior, of doing something really cute and funny and making you laugh, and then he knew that he had you then, and he lured you into his trap.
What age would you say he got that by?
Oh, 18 months, probably.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. He was a master. I remember him standing up at a wedding, looking back over the pew that he was seated in, or we were sitting in, and just entertaining the row behind him and just making them all laugh. And he was just such a little charmer and entertainer, but a scallywag. And we found with this particular child, who most of you probably know, that when we were out shopping and this kind of thing, that he would want things, and it was almost like, we're going shopping, therefore I must acquire something today. And so there was this low level of pressure to give him something from the various produce and products on display in the shops and so on. And if we just said, no, we're not buying anything today for you, we've just got to get this and this and this, and we toughed it out, we might have had a fairly low level of whinging. But if we gave in, we always said it was a bit like feeding the monster, and one thing was never enough, and then suddenly all the sort of powers of persuasion and pester power would kick in, and he would just, like, it would be impossible to fully meet the desire. I don't know if you've experienced anything like that, Chris, with any of yours.
Yeah. As a principle, I would agree. With one of ours, it was certainly the case that it was better not to yield to the first bit. It's about creating a structure, isn't it?
Yeah.
Once you created the expectation, once there's a gap for them to stick with the pointy end of the tire iron in, and they start levering away. One of the things I don't understand is how single parents who have got a child 24/7, 365 ever manage to bring children up straight, because the pressure is so relentless. Sometimes, when I was small, it was only the fact that we could hand over to one another when the going got tough, and we got through.
So I guess take home point number one is learn how to tag team when we're having to resist the willpower of a 2-year-old
Yeah,
or a 16-year-old or whatever. In fact, someone smartly said that the terrible twos are just a training ground, or they're sort of a dry run for the teenage years. So kind of like you realize a little bit what you might be letting yourself in for with some challenges up ahead.
yeah. I'd add to that. The thing we learned was learning to tag team. The most important thing was learning to hear when one's spouse says, "You've had enough. Let me take over."
Yeah,
Because sometimes you get into a position where it becomes a fight, and you start to want to win more than you want to get it right.
yeah,
That's the point you need to be relieved of your duties and go off and have a cup of tea.
yeah. So, one of the things that was around when we started having children was this idea of of quality time, and that you should really aim to have quality time with your children. And it was sometimes referred to as QT. And my brother really smartly said, he said, I don't think it's so much quality time, but more quantity time. And we found that very definitely quality time was not something you could just fit into a busy schedule and say, right now I'm
Mm,
going to have 10 minutes of quality time with my child or my children, where I'm going to be the wise dad who has this profoundly influential conversation with them and talk about deep and meaningful things, but where you but that actually through spending a lot of time together, like should we say, when you're out for a long walk in the forest, or you're driving somewhere in the car, out of those extended periods of time, we found that quality time started to kick in, and it was kind of like you look back and think, wow, that was a really good day, but it started off with us all being properly grouchy and not getting on at all well. And look where we've ended up. Isn't this amazing? And maybe
mm.
you could perhaps put some comments up, guys, if you're listening. I don't know if anyone's finding that during this period of lockdown, that actually even days that perhaps started out pretty grumpy and sour actually turned around and became a really good day in the end, with some really productive conversations and connections. So maybe you could put some comments up. Um, when the dad, when we have the stereotype of dad going out to work all day and coming home, and mum being there in the sort of mosh pit or whatever of the daily life, and then dad's really job is to kind of quell any revolutions that are uprising amongst the children and get them off to bed and get them in the bath or whatever. It seems like that's kind of quite hard to do quality time in those moments. Um, but most dads, they do say that boys don't grow up. It's just their toys get more expensive. And so most guys have got some kind of passion, or maybe a hobby or sport or something that they're really interested in. And it's like your own little thing. And maybe your wife is not interested in it at all, but it can become a currency that builds an opportunity for, or buys an opportunity, should we say, for building quality time and quantity time with your young people. So maybe that's a good one to start thinking about. Like, so if you're interested in football, taking the kids down to the marsh or something to play football when we're allowed to do that again, or playing football in the back garden if you're lucky enough to have a back garden, can be a really good little bit of reprieve for mum. But it can also be a time where the dad gets to bond and connect with the children and have some good banter and fun, and also in that banter and hurly burly and nonsense and stuff can come some good conversations, hopefully.
Yeah,
Um,
even
yeah, go on,
sorry,
Chris.
even day-to-day tasks like washing the car or doing
Yeah,
gardening, stuff like that, cleaning tasks. I think the idea of working alongside the child it creates a different dimension of the relationship.
yeah. Building a fire, always a good
Oh
one,
yeah,
especially at the end of the day when it starts to get dark. Even if it's cold outside, you light a fire out down the bottom of the garden or something if you're allowed to, and it just sit around and poke the fire and make the sparks go up. Brilliant. Or I'm not going to suggest you might light a fire on the beach, but there may be some places where that might be okay. And that is really fun. And cooking your tea on a fire. Caveman
mm,
activities are always popular with kids. Just think about so maybe you're into fitness or running or kayaking or painting pictures or playing music or something or something or something. And I know lots of those have got a kind of skill base underlying, which can be quite daunting to a child. But if we are smart and we learn how to introduce them to it at a level where they can start to achieve something fairly early on, we can soon get an ally who likes some of the things that we like, and then it becomes so much more fun when you can do some stuff with your children.
mm.
I always thought having a son that he would be interested in DIY and all the stuff like that. Not a chance. Not a chance. And then um, my daughters actually became very interested. One or two. There was a time when Daisy, the littlest one, was I had the blowtorch out and I was soldering some pipes under the floor in the little downstairs toilet, and I had the floorboards up, and I got this blowtorch going, and all these, and it's like really hot and sweaty because of the thing, right, tiny little room. And then I'd become aware of this toddler climbing up on my shoulders, and her little head's there, and she's peering over my shoulders and watching me with the blowtorch. And then I show her how it works and get her to press the button and make it go. And of course, she absolutely loves it. She loves the cordless drill, anything like that, and just fab. Whereas Josh, my son, we were on holiday and I wanted to go snorkeling, and I went and I saw these incredible fish, and I thought, this is amazing. I wish you could see them, Josh. And so he was at the stage where he couldn't swim and he was afraid of having his face under the water. So we tried him on with a mask and just gave him a snorkel and said, right, just hold your breath and we'll dive under and we'll look at all the fish. And he was so excited by all the fish that he learned how to breathe through the snorkel. And he would hold on to the waistband of my swimming trunks, and we would dive under the water and look at all these fish together. And it was basically how he learned to swim, which was really cool. So let's just have a bit of time, maybe on your own, maybe with your spouse or your partner, and just thinking about what kind of passions and interests you have that are transferable, that become like a currency to buy credit in this relationship thing with your children. So Matt says, boys do not grow up playing football, DIY, washing car, and making barbecue. Oh, wait, sorry. No, boys do not grow up. Yeah. I think if we've grown up, we've done something wrong. Don't that. Playing football, DIY, washing car, making barbecue together is also great. Yeah, barbecue. Get them cooking. In fact, get them cooking in the kitchen and give mum a day off and let them cook lunch and cook tea and be experimental. I mean, you're Pete, Chris. Amazing chef.
Yeah,
He amazes me.
he's very creative, isn't
Yeah.
he? Yeah, he's got that.
So, Matt, what are your boys into at the moment? There's a bit of delay here, so we'll catch up in a sec. So eating together is a great opportunity to build relationship. Spending time sitting around the table over food is a classic. It's very easy to substitute the table for the sofa and go for the TV. And sometimes that's fun, and having a pizza and watching a movie is fun when it's intentional and you're doing it together. But sometimes it can be a bit of a default and a bit of a shortcut, and you actually realize now we're missing out something here and we're not really having proper conversations. But when everyone sat around the table, is a good time to get them to socialize with each other and talk and share and plan, to just foster warmth, to maybe go around the table and just say something like, what have you really enjoyed most about lockdown, or what do you love most about your mum, or what do you think mum, what do you think of all the skills mum has, what do you think her best skill is, and get them to go around the table and that kind of thing, and to communicate about each other and how things are, and talk about the different hopes and dreams. Okay, so you had £1 million. What would you buy first with your £1 million, or what would you do with it? Is a good question. And start to think a little bit about what kind of values they're taking on board. But it builds relationships.
One of the things we found when we had teenage kids, when we had lots of teenage kids, 6 or 7 of them, was the evening meals started to get more fragmented. People would be coming in late or missing a meal because they were somewhere else or whatever. So breakfast became more important. We always had Bible time, weekday breakfast, but when they were in their early teens, we began to make a big thing of Sunday breakfast. And we had bacon and egg and stuff like that.
Nice. Yeah.
And make it a more formal thing, because it was more, everybody would be likely to be there. So you get them all around the table at least once a week. Wow. So that people could update their agendas. We would talk about what the week was held in store and what needed to get done and stuff like that. And it sort of acted as a bonding thing.
So good. Wrestling, play fights. I used to do the Tickle Monster, I know, but it would literally end up with plates and cutlery and stuff going everywhere. I'd get in trouble with their mum because I'd tip a cup of coffee over, but literally the Tickle Monster would lurch from the doorway and just fly through the air onto the sofa. Ah! Or swimming in bed. I don't know if any of you ever done swimming in bed, where you dive in the pool, you put your swimming hat on and your goggles on, and you dive in the pool, which is under the duvet in mum and dad's bed. Then you have to swim under the duvet to the other side. Oh, it's fun. And then the bus. So I was the bus, and I would take them all up the stairs on my back all at once. So at bedtime is a good way of getting them upstairs, because they all wanted to ride upstairs, because they would like fall off, and it's kind of like near-death experience once or twice. But as I sort of lumbered my way up the stairs, they would be just crying with laughter, and we would kind of just about reach the top. And obviously, as they get bigger, it becomes more of a challenge because they weigh more, and you realize, what have I taken on? And when you've got a big old, like, 14-year-old boy who's as heavy as you, and you're all like trying to make your way upstairs, it's quite fun. But Matt said some really cool things here. His boys are into, so 2 boys and 1 girl. So the question we have to ask, Matt, is your daughter into any of these things as well? So go-karts, cars, making gadgets, video games, movies, bike rides, football. So those sound all like very much like Matt things to me. So the question is Faith into any of those things as well, Matt? Does she share your passion for BMWs? So, go on, Chris.
I was going to ask whether Matt makes cakes as well.
Yeah. I'm not sure. Well,
I
let's
think we
hear
should
from
be
some
told.
more of you guys. What kind of opportunities you found have come through hobbies and interests? Making up stories. Making up stories. Oh, Pete, bless him. I often feel I had a deprived childhood, but growing up in the White House sounds quite traumatic. It's had its moments, Pete, and we're still trying to do it now. We're still trying to complete the race, if you know what I mean. Oh, hi Emma. Nice to hear from you. How you doing? So Emma, um, maybe put up something about what you, as a single mum, what you perhaps find the the best kind of contribution that your brothers and so on bring into your family as representatives of the male of men. What do you know? What as role models now? What do these guys bring into your family? That would be good to hear from you. So Chris, why don't you talk a little bit about boundaries?
Okay.
Obviously, if I could just set the scene a little bit, when our son was growing up, we didn't. There were certain issues that kept we couldn't seem to manage, and we couldn't seem to enforce boundaries well at all. And we tried to follow all the received wisdom on parenting, and none of it seemed to work. And it wasn't until he was 16 that we discovered that he had Asperger's and ADHD as a sort of combined package. And we realized that the reason we'd been struggling was actually pretty obvious to the professionals who were brought into our lives at that point. But we thought we were just utterly lousy parents and incapable of being consistent. And it wasn't until the pediatrician said, "You guys are doing an amazing job. That's why he's as far on as he is." We thought we were epically failing. And in terms of trying to preserve the environment, just stopping it becoming a kind of opportunity for a meltdown or a mean cruelty trick to one of his sisters kind of thing was a huge challenge. So maybe Chris, you've had so much more experience than most of us in being a dad. Talk to us a bit about boundaries.
Well, the first thing to say is every child is different. What works with one child doesn't necessarily work with another. What's for sure is that every child needs boundaries. They need boundaries as much as they need food and water, but they don't know they need boundaries, which means that you encounter resistance when you start to create them. So it's really important to think about where the boundaries should be. In another context, somebody once said, when you draw in a line in the sand, be very careful where you draw it because you're going to have to defend it then.
Yes.
And it's important that if there are two parents, that they see eye to eye, and that if there's discussion to be had about where the boundaries should be, that's done out of the hearing of the child, because children will use any opportunity to break through boundaries. They think they don't want boundaries, but a child without boundaries is a deeply unhappy child. So you need consistency between the parents, and you need consistency between occasions. So if the boundary is set, it's set, and you need to be prepared to go on explaining, go on pressing the reset button. Sometimes that's done through discipline and punishment. Sometimes it's done through conversation, depending on the age and receptiveness of the child. But you need to go on presenting the boundary and I was going to say enforcing it. That's too strong a word, but reinforcing it perhaps and resetting it so the child has the boundary clear in their mind. When children have clear boundaries, they may cross them from time to time, but they become secure. When they become secure, they grow and develop in a healthy way.
Mm.
I think for a lot of people in lockdown, boundaries is a big issue because when you've been in each other's faces for 4, 5, 6 weeks, some things really start to get on your nerves. But get out of my face is not a boundary.
What would you say? That's a really good point, Chris. Get out of my face is not a boundary. What would you say the kind of life and death boundaries are for you? Your sort of irreducible minimums, if you like.
there has to, well, it's not to be sure of life and death, but there has to be something about meal times and something about bedtime. You have to be able to carry out the activities of the day, eating and drinking, toileting and bed. By the time the child's an active toddler, there's got to be some boundaries. It can't let all of those things be a fight. The thing that happens if you don't have a boundary is everything's negotiable every time. And nobody has the energy to make that sort of effort on a 24/7 basis.
Yeah.
But there has to be a routine, and routine is part of boundaries. So create a bedtime routine. Maybe there's a bath and a story. Maybe there's 11 stories. But whatever it is, it's going to be sustainable. It's going to be agreed.
Yeah. Yeah.
The thing that destroys discipline in the house is inconsistency. So if you let them get away with it one time, and the next time you're annoyed and come down on like a ton of bricks, it just creates consternation, and consternation leads to rebellion and leads to a bigger fight later further on down the line.
Did you find that when you had little newbies arriving in your care, that your own children or other foster children who were there before, that were already with you, helped to kind of educate the new arrival? No, we don't do that in this family.
Yeah, and they helped us as well. Sam particularly was a good eater, and if we had a child who was a disordered eater, that one side case of a little boy who was abandoned by his parents who came to live with us, and he'd been told by somebody not to accept food from strangers on the day that he was found by the police. So he came to us, and Ruth sat him down with food. He said, "I don't like to eat."
Oh dear!
If you've been told not to accept food from strangers.
Wow.
So we sat him down at the dinner table with Sam next to him, and Sam's philosophy was he ate his dinner, and then if there was any left on a neighbouring plate, he could start on that. So this kid, who's called Keith, suddenly realised he got turf to be fed when he started going down Sam's throat.
Excellent. I love that.
He finished his meal in the end. And when I was young, they had a real grasp of the applicability of the rule to everybody. There was one Sunday morning where I completely lost it with them. I overstepped the mark and shouted at them in a way that I shouldn't have. I said to my wife, "You take the kids to church. I can't really go." Have you said that?
Wow.
And I heard this one then. He said, "Don't be silly, Daddy. Say sorry, then get in the minibus."
Oh, nice. Perfect.
Yeah.
Excellent. Chris, I'm just going to interrupt you 1 sec to read out Emma's comment before it slips off the top. She says, "My brothers are incredible. They do the kind of things you were talking about. They play mad games that just would not occur to me to play. But for the girls, they give a safe place to blossom as young ladies. Their comments about how brave and beautiful the girls are hold far more weight than mine. They encourage their wild sides and the heroines inside of them. Don't you love that?" Emma, that is absolutely stunning. So uncles and granddads, and friends of the family, like Pete Naylor says, "I've just been reminded that although I'm not a dad myself, there are still opportunities to be a good role model. For example, I'm currently teaching a friend's daughter to drive. It's actually a real privilege and a bit scary." Yeah, and there we go. I mean, gosh, there are so many opportunities for uncles and male family friends to be like that, introduce that kind of positive and like reinforcement of the young person from another male voice. And I think that's really profound. That's beautiful. Sorry, Chris, keep going about boundaries. You're doing great.
Well, I was going to say, really, it fits in with that last point, that if you're separated, it's still important to come to agreement on boundaries. And whether you live with your children or not, you still have whether you get on with your spouse, your ex-spouse or not, you still have an important job to do in maintaining the boundaries and carrying on creating the atmosphere and environment that children can grow and thrive in.
And I think sometimes um, it's easy to think that, oh, if we get divorced, then I don't have to live with this intolerable person anymore. But actually, if there are children involved, you have a relationship with each other till forever, because
Yeah,
those children need a mum and dad all the way through their lives, don't they? And the marriage may have disintegrated or the partnership may have fallen apart, but essentially, to the guy, you really do need to step up to the plate and be a big guy and cooperate with the child's mother and really work hard to make it good, so that
and
the children, we don't insult and injure our children by them seeing us constantly at war and constantly sniping at their mother. That is no help to anybody.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So also dads of, dads, other dads within a church or in a social setting, it's really good to encourage other people's children and to be a partner, if you like, in the community, bringing up everyone's children together, so that we speak well of, and we encourage other children, and we're not just so self-centered on our own little family unit that we can't acknowledge someone else's child. And there's obviously got good, right boundaries that should be observed in that, and we don't take it upon ourselves to discipline someone else's child unless we're a teacher, and then it's within quite clear boundaries. But we do have that involvement, and we see, and it's lovely to be greeted by an adult who isn't in our immediate family, and feel that we've been recognized and acknowledged by someone else in the tribe, if you like.
mm. When we had a lot of teenagers, when we had 7 of them, we asked one of our friends to be each of the children's special friend, so they would have like outings and days out with them. That was done in a very, obviously you've got to be safe about that. You've got to be sensible
Yeah.
about who you ask. We recognised that we couldn't provide for them everything they needed, particularly because we were so stretched.
Mm.
And so the kids had somebody they could go to if they had a complaint about us, for instance, or if there was an unmet need, they could have somebody who would be their advocate.
Mm.
That worked very well.
Very good. The idea of godparents in the kind of church that we're part of doesn't often figure, but we decided as a family that we wanted to have godparents because we thought they were a good thing. So we sort of did our own homemade version, and we asked 2 separate couples to adopt, as godparents, each of our children, so different, 4 per child, and asked them to specially pray for them. And you know what? It's been lovely how that connection has continued on through, and throughout their growing up, and they still pray. It's not about getting birthday presents, but sometimes, they'll send a card or something to remember the birthday. And I'm just so grateful to have that additional input. When Jazzy passed her, I think it was GCSE maths, which she had a difficult time passing, and she tore open the envelope on results day, and we were traveling back in the car in this state of euphoria because she passed. And she says, I need to ring Olwyn. Well, if you don't know Olwyn, she's an older lady in the church family at the prayer house. And she's prayed for Jazzy all the way since Jazzy was born, I think. And so Jazzy says, oh, I've got to ring Olwyn. So she rings Olwyn. Olwyn's shrieking with delight down the other end of the phone, and as only Olwyn can. And then Jazzy gets off the phone and she looks at me and she says, oh, Dad, what do people do who haven't got friends like Olwyn in their lives? Praying for them when something like this happens. I'm like, wow, come on. So good.
Mm.
Wow. Awesome. Well, you guys, we are very silent on the comments, but thank you, Emma. And you guys who have commented, anyone else who wants to comment, please do. I'm just going to talk just real quick, just do a little shot across the bows about parenting styles. And if you imagine the points of a compass with control at the top, and to the west, not warm, and to the east, warm, and to the south, no control. So top control, south, no control. Not warm and warm. All right. Where would you put your parenting style? Would you say that you tend towards being authoritative, disciplined, maybe neglectful, or permissive? Where would you put yourself in that kind of compass thing? Would you say that, well, my children are perfectly able to make decisions, my job is really just to facilitate their decisions and help them get what they want and help them realize their dreams and ambitions, and that's my job? Or would you say, no, I'm the parent, I'm the adult, I understand what's right and wrong, I understand what are good boundaries, my boundaries are going to be inflexible and firm and steady, and I'm going to win any contest to move the boundary line? Would you say that it's all about love and affection and giving lots of warmth and encouragement? Would you say, well, no, it's about them knowing who's in charge and, kind of keeping things clear, and you're the parent and they're the child? Here we are. Forty's done a little diagram for us. He's so good. Big applause for Forty. Yeah, maybe you could jot that down on a bit of paper, and obviously you can plot a point somewhere in between two extremes, if you like, and decide where you think perhaps it might be good fun to do with your wife, and she might have a slightly different view of you than you have of yourself, and you might have a different view of her than she has of herself. But it's kind of quite a little exercise to have a look at. I grew up in an environment where smacking was very much normal, and we were told if you did that, you'd get a smack bottom. And that obviously now is not one of our options. But firm discipline versus no discipline, warm versus not warm, where would you say you are? Have you found some good ways of enforcing boundaries? I know for Anna and myself, sitting the child on the stairs was always the kind of like the ultimate sanction. And although it didn't hurt physically, and it usually didn't last more than a few minutes, it seemed to have the kind of, oh no, I've got to sit on the stairs kind of, I don't know why it seemed to be such a big deal. How about you, Chris? Did you come up with any super duper sanctions that worked?
So, pretty much the same experience as you, Paul. When our children were very young, we smacked. We'd been brought up to spare the rod, spoil the child. We never used a rod, but we believed that smacking was a responsible part of parenting.
Yeah.
And as foster parents, when the children that came along, it was made clear to us that that was no longer acceptable. This was quite a few years before they generally went out of vogue. So we thought about discipline, and the bottom step became our worst punishment. And it's interesting that when it became the worst punishment, it was the worst punishment.
Yeah.
And so you put one of them on the stairs, and the others would be horrified. They say, "You can't do that to him. He only broke a window," or whatever it was. Because it was the worst punishment, 20 minutes on the stairs, or 10 minutes, or 5 minutes. The only thing I would say about the stairs is you really have to think about how old the child is. It's pointless putting a 2-year-old on the stairs for 10 minutes because they will be off the stairs. You have,
Yeah.
it's being, the important thing about the stairs is the reset button, isn't it? You take them out of the situation, you put them down, a period of time goes by, and for a 2-year, it has to be a very short period of time. Then, okay, life starts again. You say sorry, you're forgiven, and get on with your life. The
Brilliant.
purpose of the punishment is not really to punish, but to reset.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, the aim is to disciple our children, to bring them up in the way they should go, to bring them up towards being adults who can make right decisions for right reasons, not to have vengeance on them or to get them out of our faces. And that's the principle of discipline. Is it has to come from self-discipline. You have to have an internal system yourself before you can bring it to somebody else.
That's a really profound point there, Chris. Can you just repeat that? You have to. So
Discipline,
comes from self-discipline.
discipline has to come from self-discipline. If it's just a reaction to the situation, it's not discipline. It's just eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, just vengeance. It doesn't create anything.
One of the things that we found, Chris, that's amazing, thank you. One of the things we found, and certainly I've found, is that I do things kind of in quite a, I don't know, I think I'm a bit loud and noisy and, kind of sometimes I do stuff with the best of intentions that is kind of a complete lousy thing, and find myself in a situation where I need to apologize. And I'll tell you a little story because we'd been to France and we'd been doing some kind of church mission thing. And we had to get back to the ferry. And we had a bunch of children in the car, all of ours, our family. And we were running late for the ferry. And I knew that we weren't going to get there. And we actually got lost. I think it was in Roscoff. And goodness only knows where Roscoff is. And we were completely lost. And I was looking at the time ticking away and thinking, man, we're finished. There's no way we're going to get to this ferry. Of course, I'm getting more and more ratty. Is everybody else's fault? Is that mine? I'm making enemies of everybody in the car, including Anna. And about the sort of time where check-in would have closed, I pulled into this lay-by and I said, guys, I'm really, really sorry. I've been so mean and horrible and completely inexcusably bad. And I would like to ask all of you to forgive me. And I said, also, I'm really sorry, but we've missed the ferry and it's my fault. And I do not have an excuse. And I don't know when the next ferry is going to sail. Please, will you forgive me? And the kids, bless them, they just looked at me and said, that's all right, Dad, we forgive you. At which point I felt like I did feel forgiven, but I felt like a real dog. And so I said, well, look, I'm going to pray and ask God to forgive me because I think I've sinned against him as well. So I prayed and they all said amen very dutifully at the end. And then we found our way to the ferry. And how about this? This is the best bit. We get to the ferry terminal and the ferry is still in port. And I asked the guy, is that the one going to England? He says, yeah. And he says it's been delayed because of the fog. And I said, oh, can we still get on it? He says, oh, yeah. So we drove on the ferry. The gate came up, the door shut, and the chains were released, and off we went. And we were back. I'll tell you what, happy days. I wish all my stories ended that well.
Yeah.
But learning to humble ourselves to our children and admit we've been an ass is actually pretty important, I think. Would you agree, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is important they understand the rules apply to everybody.
Yeah.
If they're to have any respect for rules, they have to be seen as not arbitrary, which means Daddy has to say sorry the same as anybody else. Then he gets in the minibus and goes to church.
Yeah, so funny. Cool. Well, we've got a few minutes left. So any more comments you'd like to put up, please do. Let me just say this with regards to boundaries and discipline and all the rest of it. Don't run away from it. And like Chris said, the most important thing is that we're consistent. What we were talking about last week, I think, is a really good foundation from which our discipline and boundaries, etc., within the family should spring. And that is that we said, didn't we, that the child learns so much, and the brain of a child is developed so much in those early years by love, affirmation, warm, affectionate touch, lots of eye contact, lots of face-to-face communication. And if we keep that thing going and we keep that relationship going and building on that basis, and then our discipline is firm and consistent, but within that context of love and affirmation, and we spend a lot more time talking about what they've done well and what we love about them, and the lovely qualities that they have and so on to our children, than we do about all the ways they've failed and sort of disappointed failed the boundary system or whatever. That's so much better, because then we create this environment where they thrive and where they want to be ambitious to do something, and they take risks and kind of live and put their personality out there for the world. One of the things, sorry, I'm now having a memory. One of the things that has been really wonderful is when our children have suddenly got this creative thing going, and they decide they're going to put on a show for us. And so they sometimes it's well rehearsed and well produced, and sometimes it's just spontaneous improv in the spur of the moment. Is complete looniesville. But those, even to have that desire to be creative in front of your parents and to strut your stuff and to try on your new dress and give it a twirl in front of dad and all that is so good. And so, Dad, when your daughter comes in with her new outfit on, don't say, "Oh, how much does that cost?" Just say, "Oh, you look amazing. You look fabulous," and just make sure that we're just keeping that praise and that affirmation coming thick and fast.
Yeah.
So,
And don't be,
go on, Chris.
and don't be afraid to make mistakes. You will make mistakes. We all do. Yeah. And making mistakes and acknowledging it and starting again is an important part of their learning too. That's one of the things that gives them courage to risk making mistakes.
Yeah. So Isra says, "I find it easier to remember the times where my dad told me off rather than when I got smacked." That's interesting. Just, yeah. I remember my infant teacher at school. She was called Mrs. Custard. And she was lovely. True name, real name. It's like someone from Cluedo, isn't it? But her husband was in the Cluedo. I can't remember what I'd done, some minor infraction getting on the school bus, and she looked at me and she said, I wasn't in her class, I was in the top class by now. But she was so lovely. She looked at me and she said, "Poor wife, I'm surprised at you." And the bottom fell out of my world. I thought, oh no, I've let Mrs. Custard down. How can I live? Do you know what I mean? It was that kind of, she meant so much to me that for her to be surprised at me, I thought, oh my gosh, this is terrible.
That's lovely.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, always notice the outfit. If they've tried and they've done something special, notice it, guys. Don't be so what's the word? New sport and weather that you can't notice that your little girl has got a new pair of shoes. And your wife as well. Try and notice her hair and nice things she does, and try to say thank you. That's a really good one as well. Always say thank you to your children when they do something for you or do something you've asked them to do. You're not the sergeant major. You're their dad. You're cultivating an atmosphere. You're cultivating an environment where they grow and thrive. Always say thank you. Even when it's something of course they should do, say thank you when it's done. Really important. Anything else to say, Chris?
No.
Cool.
Anything.
Now, once again, we do apologise for Major Tom not being here. He will be here next week. He's promised us. I just hope he's checked his diary with his daughter. And just coming up in the next few weeks, we're going to have Paul Wakely from Bath, who is an amazing guy. He's the father of a whole bunch of children, 2 of which are disabled. One is a Down syndrome little boy, well, young man, and one has spina bifida, and I think they're certainly the one with spina bifida is living at home with them during lockdown. Paul is amazing. He's got such a lot to share and contribute, and he shared on one of our previous Being a Dad courses, so he'll be joining us. Possibly the one after Tom, but we'll keep you posted. So do keep an eye on Facebook for any upcoming posts, and do share and like and pass the word around. Get your friends to join, and let's share our wisdom and pray for each other and cheer each other on and all the rest of it. Okay, cool. So see you next week, guys. Take care, and thank you again to Forchi in the back room, making it all work, looking so smooth and seamless. Well done, Forchi. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Forchi.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Paul.
God bless you guys. Well done, guys.